During a memory, yes, sir.
Members, it's with a very heavy heart that I rise today to ask that we adjourn the Senate in memory of a truly great man and a former member of this body, Senator Alan Cerroti. I want to point out that we're honored to be joined today by Alan's family here in the gallery. Michelle Rakoff, his longtime partner, Beth and David Melzer, his sister and her husband, Julia and Joseph Melzer, Alan's niece and nephew, and Evan Kaiser, who is Alan's longtime friend, former chief of staff and president of the Cerroti Company. For those of you who are never fortunate enough to get to meet Alan, he was perhaps best introduced by a Sacramento Bee article published in July of 1967, his freshman year in the Assembly. And the headline nicknamed Alan the underdog's champion and described how he already was respected as one of the most conscientious members of our state assembly. He went on to note his economics and law degrees from Stanford and USC and report on his humanitarian legislative efforts and his leadership role in budget negotiations with the governor's office. All this ran alongside a photo of Alan with his undeniably genuine smile and his positive comment that something that we all know, those of us who got the wonderful opportunity to know him, is his wonderful positivity. In the article, he said, "There's nothing I would rather be doing." Born in Los Angeles in 1930, Alan joined a family that had an established tradition of community work and instilled in him the values that led him to a life of public service. As he and his siblings were growing up, Alan's mother, Jean, was devoted to fostering a community of progressive philanthropy in the city and was known to open their family home to host leaders such as Eleanor Roosevelt, Paul Robeson, Coretta Scott King. Her ongoing community engagement and investment laid the groundwork for a generation of progressive Jewish activists, philanthropists, and political leaders, her son Alan very much included. Alan grew up in LA and went to Beverly Hills High School, then went on to study economics at Stanford, law at USC, went on to become the executive secretary for Lieutenant Governor Glenn Anderson, and then deputy director of the California Chile program. And through those experiences, gathered knowledge and the willpower necessary to be an effective policymaker. Ran for state assembly in 1966 and was then sworn in and immediately hit the ground running as an ambitious, hopeful, and prepared legislator, regardless of how many veto letters he would receive from Governor Reagan. Alan was, in many respects, decades ahead of most of his colleagues in the pursuit of progressive policies at a time when that was much harder, fighting for environmental conservation, LGBTQ rights, housing, disability rights, civil rights, childcare, dismantling racial discrimination. Fighting for the rights and dignity of every Californian was at the core of Alan's legislative mission, and he introduced bills year after year to protect the vulnerable. Among so many others, he introduced a number of bills trying to create employment opportunities for undocumented Californians, especially with public works projects. He fought against institutional sexism within police departments and brought reforms of biased physical qualification requirements. He pushed to end the police practice of harassing and entrapping gay men in the community, charging them with lewd conduct, which unjustly carried registration as a sex offender. At his retirement event in 1982, in fact, Ramona Ripston, the executive director of the ACLU of Southern California, referred to Alan as just about the best friend civil liberties have ever had in the state legislature. Year after year, Alan would introduce a bill to ban capital punishment in California, a bill that had been introduced annually for over 20 years, only to die in its first committee. And to his credit, he eventually got the bill out of committee for the first time in years. He called on the regents of the University of California to divest public funds from any companies doing business in South Africa amid apartheid, saying recent protests have, quote, raised once again the longstanding issue of social responsibility in the corporate investment policies of public entities. And a few years later, Alan again called on the UC's 25 Regent Board to end its involvement with the U.S. military nuclear arms research and development at the Los Alamos and Lawrence Livermore facilities. And along with like-minded colleagues, he vocally opposed President Nixon's plan to bomb population centers in Vietnam. He took out full-page ads in papers like the LA Times to highlight the devastation of Vietnamese hospitals and call for humanitarian aid. He was a gifted political messenger and policymaker because he never took a moment of his time in the legislature for granted. In fact, with only 4 minutes left before his resignation from the assembly to become a senator, He cast the decisive 41st vote over there to pass a controversial ban of aerosol containers. And 10 minutes later, he ran over here, was sworn in as a senator, and got right back to work. When Bank Americard released a Dear Customer letter in 1975 detailing their justifications for interest rate hikes, the LA Times told the story of the two vows that he made that day, that he was done using his credit card after February 28th, and that he'd run a bill to stop this kind of predatory interest hike. His years of environmental stewardship at the Capitol highlight his understanding of the inflection point our state was at the time and the drastic measures necessary to protect it. He proposed bills to retain state ownership of oil fields and to protect state parks from exploitative private concessions. He fought hard for a bill that would require 75% of government vehicle fleets to be compact cars, which would have immensely reduced costs, fuel scarcity, and collisions. He famously asked in a committee hearing on corporate representation on regional water boards, why should we have the polluters regulating the question of water quality? A good question for us to ask today. But Alan's flagship environmental achievement and cornerstone of his legacy almost certainly was his instrumental work to establish the California Coastal Commission, the California Coastal Act, the body that to this day ensures that all Californians reap the benefits of our incredible coastline. For years, Alan would introduce strong coastal protection bills and go up against groups like the Committee Opposed to Ecology Issues, which was a broad coalition of lobbyists who would meet in room 704 of the Senator Hotel to strategize about killing coastal protection bills. What a wonderful name. The Committee Opposed to Ecology Issues. Eventually, Alan proved to be the linchpin when he helped lead the effort to qualify a coastal protection ballot initiative, which then forced the issue beyond special interests and into the hands of the Californian people, and the passage of which established the Coastal Commission. And one of the many wonderful legacies that's celebrated of Senator Cerroti, his colleagues decided to name a beautiful, stunning, an isolated beach tucked away in Tamales Bay, which now holds the legacy, that fittingly holds the legacy of its namesake. When folks visit Alan Cerroti Beach, Californians are immersed on all sides by the pristine peace of our coast, preserved in its natural state, and something that Alan would be so proud of, something he fought so hard for. In addition to his environmental work, he fought for special education funding, child care center funding with 80 new facilities, pension protections for teachers and public servants. He was passionate about the rights of the disabled. Alan passed legislation that protected works of art. He ensured that artists receive royalties for the resale of pieces. He protected artists' ownership of their work when hired. He most notably helped to establish the State Summer School for the Arts and remained an active member of their board. The program will soon be convening its 35th class of young artists, adding to the 17,000 that have earned their place in the program since its inception and seeding the next generation of California artists. Alan also fought for years for the establishment of a percent of art law, a policy ensuring the inclusion of public art and local artists in projects, and he succeeded in establishing a number of local versions that brought long-term investment to California arts. And now I'm humbled to serve as the vice chair of our joint committee on the arts, which was the very committee that Alan established in 1981, furthering its mission of expanding access to and investment in the arts in California. As noted by Congressman Garamendi in his recent remarks honoring Alan on the U.S. House floor, his commitment to his community expanded beyond his extensive career in public service. Upon retiring from the legislature in 1982, Alan immediately accepted positions on about a dozen boards of organizations and spent the next few decades deeply engaged in his community at every level, including nonprofit boards. He was a founding member of the Progressive Jewish Alliance. He supported far more than his fair share of local artists and neighbors in the community as well. He was also proud to partner with the Los Angeles Family Housing Organization to convert a hotel into the Cerroti, a housing project that has provided interim housing and supportive services for 75 individuals transitioning out of homelessness before its conversion to permanent supporting housing. Alan's niece up here, Julia, who's in the gallery today, is the founder of Clock Shop, which is a nonprofit devoted to connecting people, the people of Los Angeles, to the public lands and cultural heritage of the region through the arts. Poignantly named for her great-grandfather's first business in LA, Julia's work is one example of the next generation of community leadership and investment to which Alan devoted his lifetime of service. I was so fortunate enough to get to meet Alan later in his life when I was first running for this seat. And I just really treasure the memories of the lunches and conversations I was able to have with him, both as a candidate and then as a senator. We got together at his office, at his beloved LACMA, right near the La Brea tar pits. He, of course, also was responsible for making the saber-toothed cat our state fossil. And I just loved his positivity, his openness, his kindness. You know, this is we all spend a lot of time here working really hard, and yet then we move on to other things. We're all term limited. And preparing for this really got me thinking a lot about legacy and what we all want to lay down and what we want to make sure that lasts beyond us. And I just, through studying the work of Senator Cerroti, there's so many things that we take for granted today that comes as a result of his work. Every public beach that's been protected up and down the coast, every young artist who was given a real opportunity continues to be, every family that's relied on special education support or access to child care, every legislator that enters this house of democracy with an unrelenting resolve to bear the experience of each Californian and intercede with empathy. His heart and his vision for California, and especially its underprivileged, are indelibly inked on the state and on this chamber, guiding those of us with the privilege of following in his footsteps. I was mentioning to Michelle, who was in touch with Speaker Pelosi right when Alan went into hospice care, and the Speaker wrote back to her and said, please thank him on my behalf for his greatness and his goodness. Members, I ask you to join me today in remembering the incredible life and selfless community service of the Honorable Alan Cerroti by adjourning today in his memory.
Thank you. And on behalf of the California State Senate, we extend our most sincere condolences and appreciation for Senator Cerroti. Senator Stern.
Thank you. There's very little I can add. I'll just give a personal note. The measure of a leader is not just by what they do, but those who they bring up behind them. And so I'm so grateful to Alan for being a mentor, not just Senator Allen, but people like me. And for everybody who had the privilege as a kid to grow up near the beach. I was a kid in Malibu who just took that as a sort of rite of passage that there's the ocean and it's for us. But that was not a foregone conclusion. And in my little hometown of Malibu, there were other plans to build mansions and to go block all that access. Alan was of those communities, so it's the hardest to go say no to your own people. So for that kind of courage, and for every kid now growing up in LA, and there are millions of them who now see that ocean as part of theirs too, not just for the privileged few, I am grateful. I know they are too, and I hope his name will be on our hearts. Respectfully ask we adjourn in his memory.
Thank you. We're going to ask that you bring his name forward so he can be properly memorialized by the California State Senate.